There is not. These issues that we've been discussing today, I haven't heard them on the campaign trail. I haven't Googled everything the candidates have said, but I don't hear this. I haven't heard it at all. It's not a matter of discussion right now. Sir, in the back.
Do you have any insights into whom either candidate would appoint as the new head of national intelligence or CIA?
I don't, but I will say this. Have you noticed a change since Bob Gates took over the Pentagon from Don Rumsfeld? What have you noticed? Accountability, openness. Bob Gates turned out to be a hell of a good guy. And he served both George Bush 41 and George Bush 43. He knows a thing or two about intelligence. He ran the CIA under Bush 41. And he has tried to harmonize our intelligence and our military, I think for the first time since Bush 41, since the first Gulf War. And it's showing, but there's a way to go. There's a lot of discussion about keeping him on, if he'll stay. Wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, I guess.
Yeah,
Sure.
you said at Pearl Harbor there was a dissemination of information throughout the various branches of the military.
There were shards and fragments of warning. Yeah.
But was that the same parallel with 9/11?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Why?
Because the CIA, the original intent of the CIA was to have a director of Central Intelligence who would serve both as chairman of the board of all military and civilian intelligence in the country and the CEO of the CIA. That job, those two hats, are too much for any one man. No one had ever fulfilled the statutory responsibilities inherent in the director of Central Intelligence position, harmonizing military and civilian intelligence. And, you know, we knew these guys were going to try to attack us, but how, when, who, what, where, why? Wasn't there. That was not specifically an intelligence failure. It was a failure of the entire United States government. It was a failure of the FBI. It was a failure of the FAA. It was a failure of the Immigration and Customs Service. It was a failure of imagination. And the catastrophic systemic intelligence failure that George Tenet warned about back in 1998, that didn't happen in 2001, that happened in 2002, when the CIA told the President and the Pentagon and the American people and the world that Iraq was bristling with chemical and biological weapons, when in fact all of those weapons had been destroyed years ago. That is an intelligence failure. War is the ultimate intelligence failure. When intelligence succeeds, and it can, and it does, it can prevent war, save lives, avert a coup against an ally. When it fails, soldiers die. Sir.
Get our credibility back internationally. Would behoove the next president to set up a commission to investigate the Geneva Conventions and turn over whoever is guilty to an international trial?
My colleague at the New York Times, Nick Kristof, alluded to this in a column, I think yesterday or the day before, that there should be a truth commission in this country to figure out what has happened over the last 7 years. I don't see that happening.
I don't see it happening. It's talking about credibility in internet. I mean, if we can do it in Kosovo, we can do it in Chile, we can do it in other places.
It smacks of vengeance.
Oh,
Is it a good idea? Yeah, in theory. Okay?
South
You know,
Africa did it.
South Africa did it after apartheid. I don't see it happening. I mean, it's an interesting idea in the abstract. I don't think people can handle the truth, frankly. Sir.
Do you ever think there's a time for the press to be restrained?
I do.
It seems to me that their role has just changed significantly since World War II, and some of the things they do today works against the interests of the United States, whereas in World War II, they would never dare do.
Well, in World War II, yes, everybody was on the same team. There was also a very efficient system of censorship of dispatches. There was an Office of War Information, and correspondence dispatches were censored and controlled. I I can tell you that I've covered national security issues, before, during and after the Cold War. And I would never, ever print anything that would get anybody hurt. And when I ran across stuff that I thought might get somebody hurt, you better believe I vetted it. There are certain moral principles that even the press will obey, and that is one of them. And I assure you that that happens. Except what?
What the Valerie played.
You're referring to my former colleague Judith Miller? Or what about Valerie Plame?
Well, the outing of her as an agent.
But that was done by the Vice President's office, not by the press.
Oh, but what's that fat guy?
Sidney Greenstreet. Who? Well, look, we could take this on a case-by-case basis, but I can tell you what I believe and what the colleagues that I know believe, all right, is that there is no story in the world worth the potential loss of American life, okay? Now, we can argue, and it's a good argument, about whether the press should have written about Abu Ghraib or should have written about secret CIA prisons or the use of torture. I believe that ultimately this country is strong enough to withstand that. I also believe that the press serves a useful function, or has served a useful function, since the press tradition that I have grown up in the last 30 years is in danger of dying. We come out of a cantankerous tradition, it's true. But, in other countries, the king is law. In this country, the law is king. And we still have a free press, and we still have an open society. And when the president acts outside the law, it is our responsibility to try and figure out what happened. No one else has that responsibility. And no one else that arguably has it exercises it. The Congress hasn't. The courts have when the issue is forced upon them.
In the McCain administration, what role will the neocons play?
I don't really do politics. I've never covered politics. I've covered intelligence, national security, foreign policy, and been a foreign correspondent. I lived in Washington for 15 years, but I don't have any deep insight into the role of neocons in the McCain administration. By neocons, do you mean?
The ones who advised Cheney and Rumsfeld.
I think they hate each other, don't you?
Are there not neocons advising McCain?
There are. I can tell you about a tiny slice of this, which has to do with the CIA and the role of intelligence. McCain said in 2004, I know this is a long time ago, that he believed that the CIA was, quote, a rogue agency, unquote, that was working to undermine President Bush. That's not true. The CIA is not a rogue agency. With a few exceptions, all of them in the 1950s. Ever since the Bay of Pigs in 1961, the CIA has been exquisitely sensitive to presidential command and control. It does what the president tells it to do. But when things go wrong, presidents won't take the route. So I think that there is a hostility in the McCain camp, and possibly on the part of the candidate, towards the idea of a civilian intelligence agency, and that they would locate those powers in the military. That they would essentially do away with civilian intelligence as a function of government and give all the responsibility to the military. The danger, of course, as those of you who have served in the military know, is that military intelligence can become a self-licking ice cream cone that essentially justifies the acts. You want to have somebody calling balls and strikes, I think. We've been arguing among ourselves for 60 years about how to do this, about how do you run a secret civilian intelligence agency in an open, democratic American society. We're still working on it. Sir.